Welcome back. If it's your first time here, welcome in. In case you weren't aware, there won't be any new Cyrex Chronicles videos until at minimum October 5th, due to the 2 harassment and cyberbullying strikes I got. And if I get a third one, my whole channel gets taken down, so I don't really want that to happen. So in the meantime, I'm just going to make videos on whatever. And the subject of today's video is going to be civilian jobs and why I hate them. You see, I'm kind of lazy and I don't like to work, but I also know that I have to work, which is why I enlisted in the Marine Corps when I was in high school, because I knew that that was a job that I couldn't quit no matter what. I was just going to be stuck there. But with civilian jobs, you do have the ability to quit, most of the time anyways. And I've ended up quitting pretty much every single civilian job I've ever had. My first ever job being at Dairy Queen when I was still in high school. I'm not really sure how it works now, but back then, you basically either worked in the kitchen or you worked up front, making all the frozen sweets and stuff. There wasn't really anybody there who did both except for the manager. And even then, it was only to teach the new people how to do stuff. So after my first week there, I pretty much had to do everything in the kitchen by myself, which wasn't really too bad, except for on Sundays, because there was a church pretty close to the Dairy Queen, and every Sunday after church let out, a large amount of these churchgoers would go right to the Dairy Queen where I worked, and it would pick up pretty fast. Back then I wasn't as good at handling pressure as I am now, so Sundays always ended up being pretty stressful. The good thing about it though was that on those Sundays, the manager would usually schedule somebody else who knew how to work the kitchen so that they could help me out, and it wouldn't just be me back there in the kitchen making everything. But on the particular Sunday that I quit, I think it was July 4th as well, I was literally the only person in that Dairy Queen who knew how to run the kitchen. So all these people come rushing in to order their food, on top of the drive-thru orders that were coming in, and in just a small amount of time, I was already 10 orders behind. I remember it was pretty stressful, but I ended up getting everything done. And then my break time rolls around, but again, nobody else in the shop knew how to run the kitchen. So this dude who mainly works in the front but semi knows how to work the kitchen took over for me. I sit down to take my break, scroll around on my phone for 5 minutes, and here this dude comes walking up to me. What does he say? Hey, we got a lot of orders, and I don't know how to make a hot dog. I kind of just stared at him for a couple of seconds in disbelief, because how do you not know how to make a hot dog? But after that, I just got up and walked home. And that was the end for my short stint at Dairy Queen. I think I only worked there for 3 weeks max. The next job I ended up getting was at Checkers, and it wasn't as bad as Dairy Queen, but there's this one specific customer that would come in every night at the exact same time. And she would always get, I think they were called the chicken bites or something. And whenever you'd give them to her, she would always complain and say they weren't fresh. She always wanted the freshly cooked chicken bites. And she could tell too, if you just went and dipped it back into the fryer grease. I don't know how this lady knew that they weren't fresh, but she just knew. So she was pretty annoying to deal with. And there was another time that there was a bunch of grease on the floor. And my no-slip shoes did not do what they were advertised to do. And I ended up slipping and falling, almost taking the fryer tray with me. But the day that I ended up quitting Checkers, I was supposed to hang out with some friends after I got off. But it ended up getting super busy around the time that my shift ended. So the manager told me I had to stay until it wasn't busy anymore. Even when my friends were literally right outside waiting for me to get off. I think I ended up staying an extra hour and a half after I was supposed to get off. And after I got off, I never went back to work at Checkers. Those were the only 2 jobs I worked before enlisting in the Marine Corps, but after my contract ended, I thought it would be a good idea to go work at a liquor store. Because I don't drink, but my friends do, and I could hook them up from time to time. And working there was pretty chill for the most part. I pretty much just worked the register, stocked the shelves, things like that. But there were a lot of wacky customers that came in from time to time. In specific, there was this one group of construction workers that would come in around the same time every day to buy alcohol, I guess after their shift ended. I hope it was after their shift ended. But anyways, they would come in, grab a few drinks, and usually be on their merry way. But one particular day, they came in being pretty belligerent. And one of the guys, I couldn't really understand what he was saying because he was speaking Spanish, but he walked up to the counter, put a bunch of cash and change on it, and then he just straight up launched it at me. So I pretty much got pelted with every recognized form of US currency. And I'm usually a very calm person, but that was the one occasion where I just wanted to jump over the counter and rip him in half. But we just exchanged some words, they bought their drinks and then went on their way again. We got a couple of homeless people that would come in from time to time, and they would always pay in change, so it was pretty annoying having to count all their change, but can't really help it. And it was also just really sad seeing that they're homeless, and they're using whatever change they could scrounge up to buy alcohol. And I'm not really sure about the ethics here, But the manager had this one specific homeless guy who would come in and like pick up trash and sleep around the parking lot in exchange for 1 beer and 1 pack of cigarettes. And he would do this every day. Moving on to the day I got fired, which would make this job unique because it's the only job I never quit. I actually got fired from it. This old man comes in and he gets a bottle. So I try to ring it up, but it's not scanning. So I look it up in the system and it's like $16.99 or something. So I put that in, but he's like, hold on, this is usually $15.99. I'm like, well, sir, it's popping up as $16.99 in the system. I don't know what you want me to do about that. And then we pretty much just did this back and forth for like a minute straight. And eventually he just angrily paid the amount shown and walked out. But as he's walking out, he says, I'm going to be contacting your manager. And I didn't really think much of it. But after I got off that night, it would turn out that he did in fact contact my manager. And he talked to me about the event in question. And at the end, he said, I don't think we need your help anymore. And I was like, so does that mean I'm fired? He was like, yeah, you're fired. And that was that. I guess I wasn't being respectful enough or something. I don't know. But moving on to my next job. It actually ended up being a plastic car parts factory through a staffing agency. And as a side note, never work for a staffing agency. You will not get the same benefits as the actual employees working at wherever they put you. But this plastic car parts factory job was pretty chill for the most part. It was just really repetitive and you weren't allowed to like listen to music or listen to YouTube videos or anything while you were working, which I guess is kinda understandable. But there were some pretty wacky characters working there as well. One in particular who always claimed he worked at like a military contractor company in the past, and he's got like 18 bajillion bodies under his belt. That guy was obviously lying, I could just tell by looking at him. And I don't think anybody else ever bought his stories either. I remember he had long scraggly hair and he always wore fingerless gloves. But apart from him being annoying occasionally, the job was pretty chill. But I ended up finding out the employees working there that weren't from the staffing company were making way more than me doing the same exact jobs. And they kept moving me around to different machines because I guess I was doing too good of a job and they wanted me to learn everything. But that didn't come with a pay raise or anything. And everybody else there was working way more relaxed than I was. There was this one girl who would literally be on her phone talking to her friend the entire shift. But the second I pull my phone out, somebody's calling me out. So I ended up quitting that place because I was tired of being moved around every day, learning new machines every day. And the manager basically begged me to stay, but I wasn't having it. Now the next job I worked at, I was doing security at a construction site. And if you'll remember from my I hate r/coworker stories video, which I doubt because only 19 people watched it, which half of those are probably my friends, I had this one coworker who would not stop talking about all the girls he's been with. Even though he was obviously lying and it was really annoying to deal with, I just kind of tuned it out because when he wasn't talking about that, he could be pretty entertaining to talk to. But I remember one specific time, he came out to me and he said, dude, I just pulled a goth baddie. Then he shows me a picture of her on his phone, and she literally was just wearing a black t-shirt and had black hair. And in my personal opinion, she wasn't much of a baddie either. But this security job was also pretty chill for the most part. I pretty much just stood there, waved people into the site, scanned their IDs, got baked by the sun all day. And eventually I got promoted to sergeant, which is essentially like the security term for shift lead, I guess. So I got a $1 bump in pay, but not really much else changed. Just had to make sure everybody else working with me wasn't doing anything stupid. I actually ended up working there for quite a while, and then the site supervisor quit. And then the guy above him told me I would eventually be getting that position. So after that, a month or two goes by, and they end up hiring somebody from outside of the company to take that site supervisor position. And that's when I decided I was pretty much done with that job. I asked to be switched to night shift because those were super chill. They ended up switching me to night shift. And I was pretty much just looking for another job where I could actually do some upward movement. And the coworker I was talking about before actually found another job, and he invited me to come along with him. So I did. And this new security job was at a lake. And it was super chill. Got to sit inside of a small little box, air conditioned, heated, depending on the weather. Pretty much watched TV, watched YouTube all day, except for when I had to do my rounds around the lake, make sure nothing was out of order. And at this job, a very similar situation happened, because the coworker I spoke about was above me, and he actually ended up quitting a couple months after we started working there. And the lady above him told me I was going to get his position, which would have been nice because it would have been a pretty good bump in pay. But before that could happen, she ended up quitting, and then another person took her place, and they decided to do away with that position entirely. So upward movement at that point was pretty much impossible at that company. So I stayed there for a couple more months, and I ended up quitting. after I realized I was pretty much going to be stuck in that position forever. And then I got my very last civilian job that I worked, security at an Amazon facility. In the beginning, it was pretty chill. You just scan people in, make sure they don't have any contraband, make sure they're not stealing any packages. And that was only during like the big rushes, like break time, or when they're getting off, or when they're coming in. Other than that, it would just be 1 or 2 people coming in every now and then. And then for the rest of the shift, you're just sitting down chilling, or like doing a rove around the entire facility. And we weren't allowed to be on our phones. So I went to a bookstore and bought some books, and I'll pretty much just be sitting down reading in the downtime. The issues started arising when I found out this job had mandatory overtime. I literally did not get a day off for like 2 or 3 weeks straight. And another guy that was working there with me hadn't gotten a day off an entire month. But overtime? That's extra pay. I can handle that. What I couldn't handle was when they said no more sitting down. So I couldn't even read or do anything. We just had to stand there at the little gate the entire time. And both my ankle and my knee are messed up from the Marine Corps. So standing up for long periods of time is even more difficult for me. And I think the same week they announced we couldn't sit down anymore, they fired that guy who hadn't had a day off in a month. I can't remember exactly what the reason was, but it was something dumb. And a couple of days after that, I ended up quitting too. The company's contract was already on thin ice because they were having a hard time filling positions because nobody wanted to work there. And they just fired the one guy who would take the shifts no matter what. So it sounds mean, but I really do hope they ended up losing the contract. Because it seemed to me like they were actively trying to lose their contract. But those are my civilian job stories. That's why I hate working civilian jobs. If you have any stories yourself, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear them. But that's going to wrap it up for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. And as always, like the video if you liked the video, subscribe, send it to your buddies, or don't. Later.